For a lot of us hand spinners, weaving feels like a very natural progression on our fibre arts journey. But spinning for a weaving yarn and spinning for a knitting yarn are a little bit different. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about what those differences are and then demonstrating spinning up a single that I'm going to use for a tapestry weaving project that I'm about to start. If you're new here, my name's Becca and I'm a hand spinner, knitter and newbie weaver, and you're very welcome to my home in West Wales. If you're an old friend, welcome back. What makes a good yarn for weaving? Okay, so there's a few things we need to consider. Firstly, if you're going to use a warp or you're going to use your yarn for a warp, warps are under a lot of tension, so you've got to have plenty of twist in there because you really don't want your warp breaking. Because I'm doing a tapestry, I'm actually using a commercial cotton warp. I might get on to spinning my own warps, we'll see how it goes. But the weft also needs to be slightly different from a knitting yarn. So for tapestry, you are looking for a pretty consistent spin, okay? Not my number one kind of skill. I mean, I can do it when I put my mind to it, but it's not something I particularly get, you know, kind of really into. So we'll see how that goes. And you're also looking for something that reflects a bit of light. So that really is going to govern the fibre that you select and also the length of the staple that you select from that fibre and also the way you spin it. So because of the way you're going in and out of those really tight warp threads, then your weft has got to have a bit of substance to it as well. And it can be applied yarn, but actually quite often it's a single. So today we're actually going to spin a single, and I'm going to select a long wool that's got a good staple length with a bit of luster, and I'm going to put a fair amount of twist in it so that when I actually finish it, and I'll do the whole process so that you'll be able to see me spinning and finishing it, and then we'll do a little bit of weaving with it as well. And you'll see how I'm going to approach it. So my idea is either Corriedale or actually the Welsh mule that I bought from the Cambrian Wool Company a few weeks ago. That's also another really good candidate because it's got high amount of luster, low amount of loft, and it is also quite a long staple length. So I'm going to turn the camera around and show you the process. So this is what I've selected to spin, and it's Corriedale, some World of Wool, comb top, and nice long staple length, and it's going to be really great to spin. I'm going to be able to spin this in a worsted style, so without loft. I'm going to take the air out and put plenty of twist in it so that it is going to kind of go in and out of those taut warp threads without breaking. And the two colours I've chosen, because I'm going for a two-tone look in this next project, is mallard, as in a bit like the duck, not a bit like the duck, the name of the duck, and cerulean, which is kind of, I really do go for the same colours. I was just looking at what I've got in the stash. I always choose the same colours. Anyway, there you go. So that is what I'm going to spin with. I'll turn you around and let's have a look at the wheel. I'm spinning on my Ashford Traditional, which was built in the mid-80s. I have the original flyer, which means I've got two whirls. I'm spinning on the larger whirl, and I'm going for about an Aran weight, and I'm putting a fair amount of twist in this. I'm going to do a ply back test. Although I'm not plying this, I want to have a good idea about how much twist is really going in. I mean, I've been spinning a long time, so I don't find it particularly difficult to gauge it by just the feel of what I'm doing, but it is always worth doing a ply back test. That is quite a lot of twist, but I need quite a lot of twist. Now, Aran weight is going to be about right, I think, for the ends per inch that I've got on my loom, and I'm going for roughly 6 ends per inch and an Aran weight, and I think that's going to work about right. I am of course a total beginner when it comes to weaving, so if you are a more experienced weaver and you've got any advice, then please do leave it in the comments below, because I would love to have the benefit of your experience. If you have any questions about the spinning or even the weaving that I'm doing, then please leave a comment below. I do always get back to people. If there's a particular technique or something that you'd like to see on the channel, then you can also leave me suggestions there. This has been on the niddy noddy for about 24 hours. So here goes for the fun bit. Let's see how squiggly this is. Whoa, quite squiggly. Of course, it will not stay like that. So, next bit, hot water, cold water, thwack. And that should, in theory, set the twist. Got the marigolds on. Okay. Hot water from the kettle with a dash of cold water in it, just to kind of make it probably about 80 degrees centigrade. Sorry, dog's barking in the background. Cold water. So here we go. Hot water. So I'm going to let that sit for just a little mo. You see the air bubbles are coming out of it. Actually, you probably can't see, but there are air bubbles coming out of it. Okay, so now let's give it the shock of its life. Cold water. Now I'm just debating how I'm going to show thwacking it. I'm not entirely sure I can get the camera angle quite right in order to show this. But anyway, so it's had the shock of its life now, out of the cold water. And squeeze out the excess. The excess. Okay. And let's give it a good thwack. So there you go, it is now not all squirrely. I'm going to hang that up to dry, and the weight of the water will just be enough weight, I think, to make it nice and balanced and suitable for my purposes. And as they say in all the best TV shows, now back to the studio, or in my case, back to the very echoey conservatory. So my fibre arts journey really started at school. We seemed to do macrame for like ever. Okay, it was kind of late 70s, early 80s. I think a lot of people made a lot of macrame. So it was kind of macrame first, then it was sewing, and I really did sew an awful lot. I mean, even did an O-level, textile and design O-level, which basically was sewing. And I sewed my own clothes right up until my mid-20s, and it wasn't until I sort of got a little bit busier with work that I actually stopped sewing my own clothes. Maybe I'll go back to that. I digress, so back to spinning and weaving. So it was, yeah, sewing, knitting, and then I actually got into dyeing before I got into spinning, and the catalyst for that was this funny little book, Vegetable Dyeing in South Africa. Quite what a book written in South Africa was doing in a charity shop in Western-super-Mare in the mid-90s, I can't tell you, but it had some great information in it. But what it also had was these fantastic woven rugs that the author had done, and that sort of sparked my interest in weaving, but I actually didn't take it any further. I sort of always had it at the back of my mind. So when we relocated to West Wales and I semi-retired, I thought I would look at weaving. So I bought myself a way too big rigid heddle loom and really didn't do an awful lot of weaving, which I think I've probably shared before. I'll show you some of the things that I wove. Is that the right word? I'll show you some of my weaving. So I was given the advice by a very experienced weaver who lives locally, and she's also a hand spinner, is to not actually try and do weaving for your first attempt. Don't try and do it with your hand spun, actually use some commercial yarn. And I went to the charity shop, and this is cotton, I think it's actually crochet cotton, and this was my first go at weaving on my rigid heddle loom, which was in fact about 3 times wider than this. Oh, I just, you know, why did I not start small? I don't know. Anyway, so that was my first attempt, and you know, the edges are a bit wonky and the warp's not particularly tight, so it was a good experiment, but I sort of moved on from there. And then this was another one with commercial yarn, and big mistake here, I just didn't make it long enough. It was supposed to be a scarf, but it's just about a scarf. So then I got really brave and I thought I would use some of my hand spun. So the warp is commercial yarn and then hand spun for the weft, meaning going that way if you're not familiar with the terms. So that was kind of okay. Yeah, I wasn't in love with the process, I have to say. But next I wove this, which is my hearth rug, and this was actually specifically spun for weaving. So there are things that I did differently for this yarn than I did for those yarns that I was using before, which were basically commercial knitting yarns and also my hand spun knitting yarn. So the reason this was different was, firstly, it's a tapestry style of weaving, so basically it means you can't see the warp, you can only see the weft, so we would call that weft. I say we would call that like I'm this immensely experienced weaver. I'm really not, but this is known as weft facing. So this sort of really sparked my imagination. I really liked weaving it, but I really didn't like the size of the loom I had. So I sold it and decided that I would look for something different. And the something different I looked for was a very simple frame loom, which is back here. And came from Amazon. And what I had failed to realise was, because it's got these slots in here, really I think it's designed for making wall hangings. And whether it's because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, the thought of a woven wall hanging just gives me cold shivers. I mean, that, you know, when you're a teenager in the 80s, I was a teenager. When you're a teenager in the 80s, all your really unfashionable nans in the kind of community all had horrible, horrible 1970s wall hangings made out of God knows what. Anyway, not something I was very interested in. I'm still not very interested in it, and I know it is highly, highly fashionable at the moment, but it does not do it for me. So, not the perfect loom, but I am persevering, and I'm persevering by learning from this book, The Art of Tapestry Weaving. And so my very first attempt was this tiny, tiny little bit of weaving, which is a coaster. And I made lots of mistakes. And again, it was not specifically spun, this yarn was not specifically spun for weaving. So there are some errors with it. So here is the skein that I showed you yesterday, and there's still a little bit of energy in it, but I think that's going to be fine for weaving. And then I spun up 2 other singles, and I wanted these high contrast colours so that I can really understand the way weaving works, if that makes sense. Because I'm very much in the learning stage, I want to have a really strong line between where I've sort of made shapes and things. So there you go. I'm going to put this into a ball, and I'll show you what it looks like when I've done a little bit of weaving with it. So as you can see, I've started weaving with this, and as you can also see, I actually have not got my warp threads spaced evenly. So that is definitely something I need to work on. But I'm loving the way this looks, and the weight is fine for the roughly 6 ends per inch. It's not completely right, but it's roughly that. So this is about an Aran weight. So yeah, pretty pleased with the way that looks. But I'm going to carry on playing, and I will at some point have to decide whether this is going to be something that I'm going to take seriously, and if it is, then I will get myself some more appropriate equipment.